Everyone in Gray Harbor knew the story. 30 years ago, a storm hit the town unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Waves as tall as buildings crashed against the cliffs, winds ripped roofs from houses, fishing boats disappeared into the darkness. The town should have been destroyed, but somehow it survived. The reason, people said, was because of one man. Thomas Walker, the lighthouse keeper. According to local legend, when the storm reached its worst point, Thomas climbed to the top of the lighthouse and kept the beacon burning through the entire night. The next morning, the storm was gone. The town was safe. But Thomas had vanished. No body was ever found. People called him a hero, a man who sacrificed himself to save Gray Harbor. Every year, the town held a memorial in his honor. Flowers were placed outside the lighthouse. Children learned his story in school. The lighthouse itself was closed shortly after his disappearance. No one had entered it in decades, until I did. My name is Ethan Carter. I was a reporter looking for stories that could bring attention to my struggling newspaper. The legend of Thomas Walker seemed perfect, an old mystery, a local hero, a forgotten lighthouse. I thought it would make a great article. I was wrong. The caretaker handed me the key just before sunset. "You can look around," he said, "but don't stay after dark." I laughed. "What happens after dark?" The old man didn't smile. "That's when the light comes back." I assumed he was joking. Looking back now, I wish he had been. The lighthouse stood alone on a rocky cliff overlooking the ocean. The inside smelled of dust and salt. Everything looked frozen in time. Old furniture, rusted tools, yellowed newspapers. I spent hours taking photographs and notes. Eventually, I reached the lantern room at the top. The giant beacon sat in the center, cold, broken, unused for decades. Or at least, that's what I thought. Because when I touched it, it was warm. I pulled my hand back immediately. The light hadn't worked in 30 years. There was no electricity connected to the building. Yet somehow, the metal felt warm. Outside, the sun disappeared below the horizon. Darkness settled over the ocean. That was when I saw it, far below the cliffs. A light, moving across the water. At first, I assumed it was a fishing boat. Then another light appeared, and another, and another. Soon, dozens of lights were floating offshore, all heading toward the lighthouse. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Something wasn't right. No boats made noise, no engines, no voices. Just silent lights moving through the darkness. Then the lighthouse beacon turned on, by itself. A blinding white beam exploded across the ocean. I nearly fell backward. The machinery hadn't moved all day, yet now it was rotating slowly, the beam sweeping across the waves. I ran downstairs. The front door wouldn't open. I pulled, kicked, shoved, nothing. It was like someone was holding it shut from the outside. Then I heard footsteps above me, slow, heavy. Climbing the stairs, I was alone in the lighthouse. At least, I was supposed to be. The footsteps continued, one step at a time, higher, higher, toward the lantern room. I forced myself to follow. The sound led me back to the top floor. And there, standing beside the beacon, was a man. Tall, thin, dressed in an old lighthouse uniform. His back faced me. Seawater dripped from his coat onto the floor. The room smelled like salt and decay. "Hello?" I called. The figure stopped moving. Slowly, he turned around. My stomach dropped. The photographs I'd seen in town were old, black and white, but I recognized him immediately. Thomas Walker, or what was left of him. His skin looked gray. His eyes were completely white, and seawater poured continuously from his mouth. He stared at me for several seconds, then pointed toward the ocean. I looked outside. The lights were closer now, hundreds of them, floating just offshore. And as the lighthouse beam passed over them, I finally saw what they were. People, standing in the water. Men, women, children, all motionless, all staring toward the lighthouse. Their clothes looked decades old. Some wore fishing gear. Others wore clothes from different time periods entirely. Every person who had ever disappeared at sea near Gray Harbor, standing together in the darkness, watching, waiting. Thomas pointed again, this time toward the beacon, then toward the crowd below. That's when I understood. The sacrifice wasn't the storm. Thomas hadn't died saving the town. He had made a deal. Somehow, he had become part of whatever haunted those waters. Every night, he guided them away from shore, keeping them from reaching the town, keeping them from taking more people. For 30 years, alone. The lighthouse suddenly shook. The beacon flickered, once, twice, then went dark. Outside, the figures began moving, slowly, toward land. Thomas turned toward me. For the first time he spoke. His voice sounded like crashing waves. "Take the light." I backed away. "What?" "The light." The beacon flickered again. The figures in the water moved faster. Thomas stepped closer. Water pooling around his feet. His expression wasn't angry. It was exhausted. The look of a man who had carried a burden for too long. Then I realized the truth. His sacrifice had never ended. He had been trapped here for 30 years, holding back whatever waited in the ocean. And now he couldn't do it anymore. The lighthouse shook violently. Glass shattered. The dark figures were already reaching the shoreline. Thomas stared directly into my eyes, then whispered, "My turn is over." The next morning, the people of Gray Harbor woke to find the lighthouse beacon shining for the first time in 30 years. The town celebrated. They thought someone had restored it. Nobody knew what had happened. Nobody knew why the old newspaper reporter was suddenly living alone inside the lighthouse. And nobody questioned why he never left after sunset. But every night, I stand beside the beacon, watching the ocean, watching the hundreds of figures standing beyond the waves, waiting, because some sacrifices don't end when a person dies. Sometimes, that's when they begin.